Ask everybody to please take a seat. Sorry we're running a little bit late, but we'd like I'm the Vice Chair of the Oakland County Board of Commissioners, and I'm the Chair of the Human Trafficking Task Force here in Oakland County. Today I'm really excited about the news we're going to announce. And if you didn't notice and you didn't grab one on the way in, everybody should be wearing a blue ribbon in recognition of Human Trafficking Awareness Day. We have multiple speakers planned for today to point out the seriousness of human trafficking and help us announce a step forward in a battle against human trafficking here in Oakland County. But before we get to the speakers, I'd like to explain how we arrived at this point here today. The topic of human trafficking has been in the news, and I'm sure you've all heard about it over the last couple of years. And from a personal standpoint, it's one of those things that keep me up at night, as a father. Human trafficking is real. Anyone, anywhere, can be a victim, regardless of race, class, education, age, or gender. In January of 2017, the Oakland County Board of Commissioners created a bipartisan task force on human trafficking. The goal of this task force is to serve as a resource for the prevention of human trafficking and to bring many different groups together for the protection and rehabilitation of victims within Oakland County. The task force includes 3 commissioners. We work in conjunction with the Oakland County Sheriff's Office, the Oakland County Health Division, the Oakland County Prosecutor's Office, the Oakland County Circuit Court Family and Youth Assistance, Oakland Schools, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, and victim service agencies of Care House and Common Ground. The group has discussed how best to address the issue of human trafficking here in Oakland County and consulting with other agencies when we need to. One of the great things that I need to point out about is the passion of this group. Every meeting, everybody is very passionate about what we're talking about, which is very important. Some of the summaries of the points that we discussed: collect and analyze information on human trafficking in Oakland County, improve public awareness of human trafficking and prevention measures that can be taken, help plan, coordinate, and implement community events to expand awareness, provide education and training, and prevent human trafficking. Improve information sharing and coordination of activities among organizations combating human trafficking. Review existing programs and services aimed at prevention and rehabilitation of victims. Are there any areas needing additional support or areas that need support in general? Provide information materials to assist victims in assessing available programs and services. Make recommendations to the Board of Commissioners regarding potential changes in federal, state, or any local policies or laws to enhance efforts to prevent and combat human trafficking. And one thing we realized, that anyone can play a role in the fight against human trafficking. But most people do not know enough about human trafficking itself or how to find out about it. So we asked ourselves, how do we effectively start down this path? What was our first step? Our first step, which we're here to announce today, is the creation of a website, oakgov.com/human trafficking. It will serve as a primary source for information about human trafficking in Oakland County, provide information and support for victims and their advocates, parents, and professionals, and anyone interested in learning more about the issue and how to help. Now I'd like to introduce Oakland County's Director of Health and Human Services, Kathy Forsley, and she'll provide more information and detail about the website. Kathy?
Thank you. Good afternoon. The Oakland County Department of Health and Human Services serves on the Human Trafficking Task Force with a strong support and encouragement from our County Executive, Al Brooks Patterson, who has proven his steadfast commitment to protecting victims throughout his career. This is particularly recognized during his 4 terms as the Oakland County Prosecutor. Human trafficking is a diverse and complex public health issue that impacts an estimated 26 million victims worldwide. And this includes men, women, and children. And that's across generational, socioeconomic, religious, and cultural boundaries. As such, it is an issue that demands the attention and commitment from numerous sectors and community partners to intervene and engage in the fight against human trafficking. As with all complex issues, there is no one organization or agency that can handle the enormity of this problem by itself. So together, we're working to increase awareness of human trafficking, increase training opportunities for our professionals as they work every day to intervene, provide services and treatment to victims, as well as upstream to identify and provide opportunities to prevent trafficking from occurring in our community. The Department of Health and Human Services, which includes the experience and expertise of the Health Division and Children's Village, is committed to providing important information and working alongside our partners to strengthen data collection, target public awareness, and prevention campaigns, expand training to address the root causes of human trafficking, and empower survivors of trafficking. Our work is intended to inform the community, and as such, we have created a website, and our work will be accessible on this website. And as the commissioner said, the address is www.ogov.com/human trafficking. On this website, there is a Know the Facts page that will provide links to fact sheets, data, and infographics. The data and infographics information we hope will be particularly useful to those that are working to understand the problem or describe the complexity and the impact of human trafficking. Currently, there are 4 fact sheets on this website. They're geared towards the professional, and there are fact sheets geared towards the general public to improve the overall knowledge of human trafficking and also to recognize the signs, because there may be someone that we know or in contact with that is a victim. There's even a fact sheet specifically designed for parents to raise their awareness and insight about how their children can become vulnerable to traffickers. From the friends they choose, to the relationships they form, to the access they have on the internet, our intent is to provide information to empower parents. The resources webpage provides contact and general information about the National Trafficking Hotline and online resources for a more in-depth education about human trafficking. Here you will find a public awareness video, trafficking protocol for healthcare settings, a federal strategic action plan, the Human Trafficking Task Force e-guide, and a link to the Federal Resource Center with information about resources that are available for victims. Advocacy. As Oakland County advocates to end all forms of human trafficking and protect victims of this crime in our communities and across the state, ready access to laws, regulations, and prevention policies is essential to us and an important asset to the task force as well as to our community partners. For this reason, the advocacy page will provide an expanding list of links to federal and state laws, prevention policies, and regulations related to human trafficking. And finally, the training and webinars page houses links to online trainings and webinars for professionals and community members to learn more about the issue. Also, many professionals are now have training requirements for their licensure or during their renewal process. For instance, in the Health Division alone, our public health nurses and our sanitarians that inspect in restaurants, they all have these requirements for this training for their licensure or their renewal beginning in 2017. Social workers and many healthcare workers and other disciplines in our community also have these training requirements, and I expect there will be more in the future. Also, there are increasing opportunities that we're finding at conferences and workshops that have specific human trafficking tracks geared towards the professional. We intend to post all that we know about these trainings that are occurring in our community or across the state, as well as these conferences and workshops here for the professional to access. So while attempting to be comprehensive, in reality, we do recognize this website is in its infancy. With the commitment of many individuals and organizations, this website is intended to rapidly grow and expand to become a one-stop shop for information and resource connections to assist a victim, an individual, a parent, or a professional in this coordinated, community-wide, and multidisciplinary response to human trafficking. It's now my pleasure to turn this over to Oakland County Commissioner Janet Jackson.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. As Kathy just said, I am Oakland County Commissioner Janet Jackson, and I want to just thank her for such a comprehensive overview of our website, which is a result of hard work by many individuals within her department and a lot of folks that I see sitting in the audience. I hope that Commissioner Spiz, our chairperson, maybe will recognize you before this is over. The website and task force both have been a bipartisan effort, historically not as much political, but mostly passionate, as we care about human lives and those most vulnerable and the conditions in our community. Personally, I've been concerned and involved with addressing the serious problem since 2013, helping to initiate the Oakland County Human Trafficking Task Force and coordinating an annual county-wide hotel outreach and awareness activity, partnering with Metro Detroit SOAP, which stands for our Adolescents from Prostitution. This is an anti-human trafficking hotel outreach and education program. These actions were in response to FBI human trafficking sweeps originally in 2013, which ranked Detroit as the second in the country for this activity, and with Southfield and Madison Heights leading locally for such arrests. Represent a portion of the city of Southfield. Last year, at almost this exact date, during the annual auto show, during a local sting operation, an officer was shot and a suspect killed during a human trafficking hotel sweep in Southfield. Even as late as August 2017, arrests were made in Southfield hotel rooms used for drug and human trafficking. So we know that law enforcement is a crucial partner in addressing this problem. Their personnel serve as active members on the task force and are on the front line every day combating this serious issue. Our county sheriff and local police departments in cities like Southfield and Madison Heights execute an active role enforcing laws and partnering with agencies that address the needs of rescued survivors. And also, they play a part in educating and creating more awareness about the problem in the community. So today, we know they are fighting this crime from the street to the national level. We are very grateful to present today two very prominent local law enforcement officers in this fight, who we all thank very much for their continued efforts. First, I would like to introduce Oakland County Sheriff Mike Bouchard, who will detail some of the Sheriff's Office activities leading the Oakland County Gang and Violent Task Force to help harness this crime. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And you're very true that it takes teamwork, and it's not just law enforcement, it's the community to recognize the signs and symptoms and to be aware that it happens everywhere. Good communities are as much subjected to trafficking as any community. So a lot of people kid themselves and believe it can't happen here. In fact, Michigan is number 8 in the country for human trafficking by most reports, and that's not a top 10 list we want to be on. And the partnerships, as mentioned in law enforcement, my good friend Prosecutor Cooper, Attorney General Schuette, all the law enforcement agencies here, we work seamlessly. The FBI is based right on our campus with the Gang and Violent Task Force, doing great work together, because that's what it takes, all of us working together to attack this insidious crime. And on our staff, Lieutenant Wendy Reyes is an amazing resource in person, and we're proud of the work she's done. Not just here, but she's gone to different functions around the world to get more insight and to partner on this worldwide epidemic, quite frankly. And so I was asked to speak to a couple of the things to kind of look for in this trafficking. Now, their trafficking tends to typically be focused in sexual trafficking or labor trafficking, with obviously the biggest percentage in the sexual trafficking. But some of the signs in the work environment, people may appear to be working against their will, unable to leave or restricted in their movements or environment, forced to work under certain conditions, unable to negotiate the kind of conditions or compensation for the employment, and little or no pay. Similarly, in homes, you see the same kinds of things, unable to have freedom of movement, may not have their personal documents, passports, or identification, may not know their addresses. That's not an uncommon thing. They may not know because they've been intentionally kept in the dark, limited social interaction, and they feel that they can't leave. Also, they're often told and intimidated to fear authorities, the very people that can help them. That's not unusual as well. So unexplained injuries can be often one of the signs and symptoms. As I said, distrustful of authorities. They're concerned that their immigration status may be an impediment to them reporting the crimes against them, which is a problem and a concern. And then often we also see people that bring them from other countries. Now, we also have trafficking victims right here, homegrown, taken right here. But when they're brought from other countries, sometimes there's specific countries that have a higher likelihood. So if you see folks from those countries, potential signs and symptoms. And some of the facilitators will actually pay to bring them here and control their movement and their documentation. But to that point, you know, Commissioner, you mentioned working together on law suggestions. So one thing jumped in my mind, and I'm never one to not speak my mind, obviously. Michigan is one of the handfuls of states in the country that does not allow wiretaps by state or local authorities. That could be one thing that our legislators, and I saw a couple here, should think about addressing and hold some hearings on. With valid warrants, probable cause, some crimes only can be put together with certain kinds of evidentiary standards. And our prosecutor knows, and the Attorney General, and certainly we worked with federal authorities. We had a case here in Oakland County that met pretty much every one of the things that I just told you. And I'm convinced they were human traffic victims. Not only were they brought from another country, it was organized across state lines, but it was so complex and it happened that the case couldn't get put together because of the lack of some of the conspiracy evidentiary requirements. And that kind of law to allow state and local to have the ability to get a judicially approved wiretap to begin to put that through would help us on the state and local level attack some of these crimes. So in terms of legislation, I know the feds have wiretap authority for a different number of things, but that's one of the kinds of things because these are very complex cases. And in the case that I just mentioned that was never really brought to the public's attention is because we couldn't get the charges necessary as much as we were all dying to prosecute these folks. Clearly we knew what we had. I think it was shut down to some extent because of our enforcement actions, but we couldn't bring the charges that really were due. And so, to your point, I think that is one thing where we could begin to look at what are the tools, and speaking with law enforcement, our state, federal, and local partners, what kind of tools do we need to add to the legislative request in Lansing to get into the ability to begin to bring some of these organizations and heinous people down. So we're very committed to attacking this problem, and it's very much like terrorism. You know, I know there's an effort, see something, say something. Same thing applies here. If you see somebody that appears to be fearful, intimidated, showing signs of injury, doesn't have some of the things that I talked about, you really need to share that information. I mean, we'd rather check out 100 false things than miss one real one. And so it's going to take a collective effort because there's so many more eyes in the community than law enforcement. We only see a sliver of the community. You see what's going on in the apartments and the hotels in your neighborhood before we do. And I would also say, you know, Madison Heights and Southfield are high on the list, not because they're bad communities, because they have a lot of hotels. Those are great, safe communities, but because of their hotel population, they tend to be a magnet for the trafficking activity that is transient. So I wanted to make sure that two of my favorite communities knew that we love them. I think those are what I wanted to speak to, but I also want to introduce my friend and partner from law enforcement, the great chief from the city of Southfield, Eric Hawkins.
Thank you, Sheriff. And thank you, Sheriff. And we're glad to be your partner also, and thank you for those kind words about the city of Southfield. And also to Commissioner Jackson, I commend you for working tirelessly all these years for victims of human trafficking. You really have made a difference, and you've made a difference in the Southfield community, so we appreciate you. And I also thank the Oakland County Board of Commissioners for creating the Oakland County Human Trafficking Task Force. As a local police chief, as the sheriff said, we see some of the things at the ground level and some of the impacts that it's having on our communities, on our police departments. And so I want to talk a little bit about the impact that human trafficking has had on local police departments, because we all know the devastating impact that human trafficking has on the victims of these crimes. But what's lesser known is the impact and how it affects local police departments and the operations in police departments. And I see it, as the sheriff said, up close and personal in Southfield, because we have such a high concentration of hotels and motels, and as the sheriff said, they're magnets for this sort of activity. So I've seen some of these things, and what we see is that when human trafficking occurs in our local municipalities, there will be a corresponding increase in major crimes and in social disorder and quality of life complaints. And I've seen those things increase steadily over the last few years. And thankfully, because of organizations like the Human Trafficking Task Force, we're starting to see a decline in some of those sorts of things, because as you attack those, then you also see that corresponding decrease. And so what it does to me and to my other chiefs that we have out here, chiefs and directors at the local levels, is it forces us to redirect valuable and scarce resources. Right now, what all of us chiefs and directors in Oakland County are focused on is building and maintaining relationships with our communities. We've seen some of the things that have been occurring across the country, and what everybody is saying is that police departments, especially local police departments, must rebuild, maintain these relationships with our local communities. Well, when we have an infusion of human trafficking in our communities, we've got to redirect those resources from community policing programs, community outreach. Some of the things that we were doing to build these relationships now have to go to our hotels and some of our other parts where we're having problems. So what ends up happening is we end up spending more time in our hotels and motels dealing with human trafficking related issues and less time doing community policing things. We end up spending more time investigating sexual assaults that are associated with human trafficking and less time building substantive relationships with our youth in our communities. We end up spending more time dealing with the overdoses that are associated with human trafficking, because as we all know, a lot of the victims of human trafficking are dealing with substance abuse issues. And we're dealing with those sorts of things in less time putting my patrol cars into our communities and helping our residents feel safer and more secure in our cities. So I'm thankful that our Board of Commissioners created this task force. It really is making a difference. And by reducing the prevalence of human trafficking in our communities, what this is going to do is make our local police departments much more effective in doing what we should be doing. So I thank you, and with that, I will introduce Oakland County Commissioner Eileen Kowal.
It has been my honor to be able to serve on the Oakland County Human Trafficking Task Force. I would like to thank Commissioner Spiz and Commissioner Jackson for allowing me to participate in this. It kind of creates a link for me from the Michigan Human Trafficking Commission and all the work that was done there. And I thank everybody that's been involved and with all of their very input from all different kinds of experiences with this horrific crime. At this time, though, I would like to introduce the Attorney General for the state of Michigan, Bill Schuette. Human trafficking has been important to Attorney General Schuette since taking office. At the national level, he immediately took a leadership role with the National Association of Attorney Generals Pillars of Hope initiative. And then he formed the first human trafficking prosecution unit within the Department of Attorney General. In 2013, he collaborated with the legislature to form the first Michigan Human Trafficking Commission. The commission, working with a victim-centered, trauma-informed approach, emphasized that men, women, and children who are trafficked are victims, not criminals. We had two main goals: assess the threat human trafficking poses to Michigan residents and develop policy recommendations to promote its exposure and prevention. Like we have done here at the county, we brought all the stakeholders in, from victims advocates to prosecutors, law enforcement at every level, the health departments, and more. Attorney General Schuette gave us, I believe it was like 5 months to finish our work and come up with a report. And after a lot of intensive effort, we did unveil the report of Michigan Commission on Human Trafficking. It was a comprehensive report covering 5 areas, much like we're doing here: data collection, public awareness, training, legislative, and victim services. This report became the basis of moving Michigan forward in our fight against human trafficking and resulted in a comprehensive legislation package that was passed in 2014 and took effect in 2015. Well, sadly, the work is never done, though, and sadly will never be done. So we did set up a standing human trafficking commission within the Department of Attorney General to continue legislative and many other efforts to eradicate this horrific crime. Though we know that the Attorney General Bill Schuette is here today, besides all of this, he knows that what happens at the local level, where the boots hit the ground in our communities, in our counties, is very integral to combating human trafficking. So he is here today to recognize the efforts of the Oakland County Board of Commissioners in starting this task force and all of the stakeholders involved. And at that, I will let Attorney General Schuette speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Eileen, and ladies and gentlemen, what a privilege it is to be with everyone today. Thank you, Commissioner Jackson, for your leadership here. Commissioner Spiz, and you're also Vice Chairman but Chairman of the task force. Thanks for your leadership. To be with my colleagues in law enforcement, Chief Hawkins and Sheriff Bouchard. Mike and I served together in the Michigan State Senate. I have a long relationship of making sure our streets are safe, our communities are places of security. Thank you for your leadership, Sheriff. And Chief and I have worked together on a case. Kathy, thank you for your partnership here. And Eileen Kowal did such a tremendous job when we first formed Michigan Human Trafficking Commission. So Eileen, thank you. And lots of friends here in the audience, elected officials, a young mayor here from Madison Heights, judges from across Oakland County, thank you very much. My partners in law enforcement, thank you for this gathering. This is a significant day, a big day for Oakland County with respect to this combating and fighting human trafficking. So that we're in this together as a team, as a group effort here in Oakland County, it sends a statement of commitment here in southeastern Michigan. So I'm glad we're here together. You know, my journey in this mission to combat human trafficking started, as Eileen was kind enough to point out, when I first had the privilege of serving as Attorney General. I worked with AGs across the country in terms of how we can have a coordinated approach and also learn from each other what are good ways to combat human trafficking and to help young women, primarily young women, but young men, young women who are victims of human trafficking. Then we formed a commission here in the state of Michigan, and we had, and believe it or not, you had Republicans and Democrats. You had prosecutors and anti-trafficking activists, sheriffs, educators, members of law enforcement, all coming together with one mission, one goal, and that is to combat human trafficking. So something good did happen, and we worked across this divide that's sometimes talked about here in our country, but it was a positive thing where we focused on public awareness and training and education and victim assistance and data in terms of how big this is is and how we can best, again, work together in a joint fashion to combat it. And the result is that we toughened the penalties against the thugs and the traffickers and the Johns, and also implemented a sea change in terms of how we look at this issue of human trafficking. Because what we did as a team, we made a decision that now young women who are forced to have sex are treated as victims, not criminals. And that was a big day and a big change for the state of Michigan, and a positive one. So we've moved on. I formed a unit of human trafficking at the Department of Attorney General. We filed 21 charges, 17 convictions, another 4 pending right now. Worked with Chief Hawkins with respect to a case here in Oakland County in Southfield. Worked closely with Mike and other sheriffs across the state of Michigan. And you know, it works by collaboration and education, being able to, Mike mentioned that, how to spot victims of human trafficking. We worked with a case in Lansing with a trained, smart MSP trooper who recognized a problem. And this case of Amber Speed, this was a ring that now we put that person's serving time because of the education component on this whole issue of human trafficking. Now, where do we go from here? Well, we all have a common mission in order to combat human trafficking. And the important thing here today is this website is a great advancement here in Oakland County. And we've heard a lot of statistics and numbers and all of that. The other thing to keep firmly in mind is that these are real people. And human trafficking can happen anywhere. North, south, east, west, across the state. And, you know, so it's not just a number on a paper or statistics. And so when you meet a victim of human trafficking, it brings it up front and close and personal. And when you meet with victims as I have, it really broadens your perspective. And I met with a young woman, let's just call her name Karen to protect her confidentiality. And she expressed to me how she came from a broken home, a fractured family, and ended up being a runaway. And she went to a community in the middle part of the state. And she met another young lady. And then they were enticed with this guy who took them to southeastern Michigan and trafficked, abused, assaulted, and pimped them out, and drugged. It was just a horror show. But she's able to escape. And then the key thing after that is you want to help this person and anybody regain their life and rebuild and provide some hope and some training, maybe a GED education, so that they don't go back out on the streets. So we have a responsibility on this whole issue of victim assistance. So whether it's Common Grounds or Care House or Vista Maria or the Manassas Project in Grand Rapids, everybody has a role to try to help victim assistance. And it can happen to anybody. I remember two years ago, vividly, where there was a conference here in Oakland County. Paul W. Smith was the moderator, and people had a moment like this to talk about human trafficking. And there's a woman in the back of the room, and she raised her hand and said that she had been assaulted, abused, and trafficked, but no one had helped her. It's a tragic story. We had some lawyers in the room go meet with her, heard her story, and then 6 weeks later, I called her up and let her know that we're filing charges against this creep and this thug that had assaulted her. And there was just dead silence on the phone, not one word. And then I could hear her sobbing because she had received some justice because of these thugs who had assaulted her in every way that you can define it. So our mission here is one to provide hope. Our mission here is to help educate. Our mission here is to have strong law enforcement to assist people so we can combat this this whole issue. And you know, human trafficking is a dark, shadowy issue where through fraud or force or coercion, people get trapped in this sex slave market. Our responsibility is to provide some hope and light to give people an opportunity to go forward for a better, stronger community in Michigan. I'm very proud to be in your company. Thank you for letting me be here. I'll turn it back over to Mike. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General, and thank you for everybody for speaking, Kathy, Eileen, Sheriff, Chief, Janet. Now at this time, I'd like to recognize the individuals and organizations that offered their support and time in combating human trafficking. If I could ask you to rise. Everybody that's on the Human Trafficking Task Force, please stand up. I'd like to give them a round of applause, please. Thank you very much. I'd also like to thank the County Executive, L. Brooks Patterson, and the entire Oakland County Executive Office for supporting what we're doing here. I'd also like to thank all the elected officials that have taken their time today to join us, so I ask you to please rise and be recognized. Again, thank you very much. And finally, I'd like to recognize the representatives in attendance from Homeland Security, the FBI, Michigan State Police, our own county judges, and all the local police departments, and the many social services agencies, which are probably too many to list. So thank you all very much for being here today.
And Jessica Cooper. Good.
So in closing, I'd like to thank you all again. I encourage you to visit our website, share it. You know, there'll be some Facebook blasts and Twitter blasts out there, so please share those as you see them. And of course, before you leave, if you haven't already taken a blue ribbon for yourself, please take one. Take one for a friend, take one for the family, because we'd like to recognize not only today, but the entire month of January as Human Trafficking Awareness Month. So thank you very much, and be safe, and God bless.